Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, it's the Journalists Roundtable. We'll look at the week's top stories, including a recap of Tuesday's primary elections in Arizona. The Journalists Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. It's Friday, and that means it's time for the Journalists Roundtable. And joining us tonight, Jeremy Duda of Axios Phoenix, Dennis Welch of CBS 5 and 3 TV, and Wayne Schutsky from KJZZ Radio. Panel, good to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us. Jeremy, we're going to start with you. We're going to kind of go to individual races throughout the show here regarding Tuesday's primary, but just a general overview. On the Republican side, it seems as though that party is still very much in the grip of Donald Trump, MAGA, and even Turning Point.
Oh, sure, absolutely. You had the, between Trump endorsements, Turning Point Action endorsements, Freedom Caucus endorsements, it was a clean sweep on the statewide races. I mean, Andy Biggs, everyone knew what was going to happen there, absolute blowout. Alex Collin, Secretary of State's race, election deniers had put out a lot of kind of wild ideas about what he wants to see happen with elections. Kim Yee backed by, Turning Point in the superintendent's race, Eli Norton, treasurer. It was really a clean sweep. We even got Ralph Heap in on one of those corporation commission races.
But was it a surprise? It's obviously a primary, and I get that, but it was a surprise not only for the wins, but the margins of victory.
I think particularly for the governor's race, that margin of victory was just huge. You had two sitting congressmen running, again, facing each other off in that primary. And going into it, I think all of us here would have agreed that, Andy Biggs was the odds-on heavy favorite in this. He had the money, he had most importantly, the Trump endorsement, which we saw how important that was with the overall results of the contest. But, Schweikert has been on the political landscape here in Arizona for decades. And you would have thought that at least he could have waged some kind of a better effort. But at the end, what the last total I saw was about 60 points he was beaten by Andy Biggs. To me, that was a surprise.
Yeah, and I want to get to the governor's race again here a little closer in a second. But last point as an overview here. Turning Point did not have a good time with the SRP elections there. Everyone thought maybe Turning Point had reached a turning point. Doesn't look like it now, though.
Well, they're just two different animals. That SRP, they were kind of dipping their toes into something they've never done before. It might be a small race, but it's a small, really peculiar race. And they tried to inject politics into something where broadly, politics may have played a role in the past. You had more pro-business Republicans versus more clean energy Democrats, but they tried to get really political with it. Here, they're going back to their bread and butter, which is partisan politics.
Right.
And they have had a stranglehold on really the hardcore Republican voter in Arizona for a better part of a decade, and that doesn't seem to be changing.
Sure, and in the SRP race, Turning Point, they galvanized a lot of conservative voters to come out, but they also galvanized a lot of liberal voters who said, oh, Turning Point's behind these people, I'm going to come out and vote for these people. So let's see how this plays out in the general election. The primary is, like Wayne said, a much different animal.
Yeah, I was going to say the general election is different, and it will, we'll likely see it just seems very curious, some of these races. We'll start with the governor's race. Jeremy, sticking with you. As Dennis mentioned, a complete and utter blowout. That being said, Republicans obviously like Andy Biggs. Do independents like Andy Biggs?
Well, Andy Biggs is doing a lot and saying a lot of things that he's hoping will make independents like him, because the Andy Biggs that we've all known for a lot of years is he led the Freedom Caucus in Congress, very right-wing state legislator. You hear him talk now, he's a bridge builder. He worked with McCain, he worked with Kirsten Sinema, Hakeem Jeffries. He's really playing up the aisle-crossing, pragmatic, bipartisan credentials. And if you covered him when he was Senate president for 4 years, he did govern, fairly pragmatically. The Senate ran pretty well. But a lot of that also kind of by necessity. Is that the kind of person, is that how he would govern as governor? I think, he's definitely trying to give, voters the impression that, he would be kind of an aisle crosser.
I think up to
more of a centrist.
I think up to a point he's trying to be moderate. That's the strategy, right? But then there are certain things. I don't know if you guys heard he was on the radio the other day, and he was asked just point blank whether he thought Katie Hobbs was the legitimate winner of that election. It's a yes/no answer. He gave a 45-second response where he acknowledged that, yes, Katie Hobbs is the governor. The courts agreed that she's the governor, but he would not say that she was the legitimate governor, which makes me question, like, are you going to go down this road again? Is this something, the hill you want to fight on? Again, we saw what happened 4 years ago with those types of candidates. It didn't go well, and I'm wondering if that you're going to get the same result out of this.
Yeah, and that's the same answer he gave to me. You know, we did a whole feature on, you know, his alleged involvement in January 6th and not certifying the election, all that thing. And he said kind of the same thing, like, yeah, she's in the governor's office. But again, it's an easy question, and he wouldn't answer it. Beyond that, though, not just the elections denialism stuff, but like his historical position on abortion. We saw how Arizonans feel about abortion the last election cycle when they added protections to the state constitution. So whether that really far-right brand of conservatism is popular, I don't know. And then on him being a bridge builder, I think someone needs to remind him that John McCain was a Republican. He keeps talking about how he worked with John McCain, like that was crossing the aisle, but they were maybe different wings of the aisle of the same side, but they were on the same side.
Sure. Jeremy, the idea, though, of the preemptive presidential pardon, the report of that regarding January 6th, a vote to overturn the 2020 presidential, the white supremacy and anti-Semitism charges that Schweikert, not to any great effect apparently, threw at him in the primary. Do these things rear their head in the general?
Oh, 100%. We are going to see millions of dollars in advertising from Katie Hobbs, from the Democratic Governors Association, other pro-Hobbs super PACs, because as much as Biggs is going to paint himself as a bridge builder, and you mentioned the McCain thing, like remember talking about working with him may be kind of a necessity after the Kerry Lake incident from 4 years ago. I mean, Biggs can say whatever he wants, but Katie Hobbs is going to run millions of ads saying extremist, extremist, extremist. That is the way she's going to portray him. Mentioning all those issues, and so that is going to be, these two are in a race to define him. I think Katie Hobbs, in a lot of ways, is kind of defined to voters. She's been around for 4 years now. People know kind of what she's about. I mean, Biggs is going to raise some of the more unsavory aspects of her, administration, but they're both right now kind of in a race to define who Andy Biggs is.
And that's the big difference between the primary that Biggs was just in and the general that he's heading into. Schweikert could have said all the same stuff, could have said anything. He did come out with some of those accusations that he likes to pal around with racists and people like that. He just didn't have any money for the message. That is not the case with the governor. This governor is going to have all the money that she needs or wants to try to push that message and define Andy Biggs.
Secretary of State race, I found this one fascinating. Alexander Culloden over Gina Swoboda, and again, it wasn't all that close. I mean, Culloden now is an election denier that Republicans want to be in charge of the state's elections.
Yeah,
Am I getting this right?
Yeah, and it's not super surprising. They nominated Mark Fincham 4 years ago, who's kind of in the same vein as Alexander Culloden. So, again, it was similar to the governor's race. It was a choice between a more electable candidate in Gina Swoboda, who had worked in the office before, had taken a much less aggressive tact on the election denialism stuff, and it was between that and kind of a party darling in Culloden, who says all the things that the diehards love, but stuff that has lost Republicans' general elections in the past.
It's a true. I mean, this is a true test of election denialism. This particular race.
Sure. I mean, this race and Adrian Fontes' last race 4 years ago against Mark Fincham, of course. Like, I think a lot of the Republicans who kind of get wrapped up in these issues in this position, it's really easy to convince yourself this is what a lot of people want when you're at your LD meetings and you're hanging around with a bunch of activists. But I think we've seen time and time again, for the most part, the general public isn't really down with that, and Fontes was very quick to try to seize onto that with his first ad, talking about I've protected the integrity of elections. Here's Alex Culloden, who's an extremist, and he wants to take away vote by mail, which last I checked is 85% or so of Arizonans vote early. That is a really unpopular position to hang your hat on.
Filed lawsuits to overturn elections.
The Kraken lawsuit.
He's part of that whole thing.
I mean, you got to remember, he was admonished by the bar for his role in filing those lawsuits. He was forced to, put on probation, and forced to take an ethics, like a court-ordered ethics class on this after all this. So his involvement in all this stuff wasn't insignificant. I mean, he was really a big point person in that whole thing.
That said, did Culloden win this race, or did Gina Swoboda lose it?
I think, Turning Point's help, I think with their support and backing, I think helped him win that race. That's where the energy with the party, with the primary voters is right now. I was surprised. I thought Gina Swoboda would have made it at least a bit closer of a race, but Turning Point has made it pretty clear that they don't like her brand of politics and have been aggressively or working against her.
Alexander Cullinan, again, most of the state, they don't know who he is, and even more people can't even pronounce his name. I mean, he's got a lot of work to do out there.
Yeah, I mean, again, he has Turning Point behind him, so he will have some money to get
Yes.
his name out there.
Yes.
But as Dennis mentioned, he's got this history that is going to be easy to define for Fontes, who again is going to have all the money in the world to get that message out there. And if we're going to look to history as a guide, in a year where we had a lot of really close top of the ticket races, the Secretary of State's race wasn't particularly close.
Yeah.
I kind of see a repeat happening here.
What about the Attorney General's race? Again, sticking with the Republican Party because we had more races there than we did Democrats, although we'll get to the Democratic Party in CD1. But as far as the Attorney General's race, Warren Peterson beats Rodney Glassman. I don't think that's a big surprise. Were you surprised by the margin of victory?
I was. I thought that was going to be a very close race. I mean, this has been a nasty primary, really the nastiest one that we'd seen statewide. A lot of mudslinging, a lot of attacks. There's still a lot of signs up all over town. And I expected Peterson to win, but I expected it to be pretty narrow.
Interesting.
And it came out, and like when I first saw that first batch of results, I said, oh wow, this is much wider than I thought. And so Peterson got to come out, and I think it took a day or so for it to get called, but he declared victory pretty quickly at Andy Biggs' election night party, where Biggs actually wasn't. But
that was a nasty race. I see, like, every time I was looking up at the TV and I saw one of those ads, there's like Warren Peterson like breakdancing, that ad at some party. I mean, that thing seemed like it was running forever, but he overcame all of that. And I think too, there was a bit of a bias within the political class because a lot of people know Rodney Glassman. He's been around. He's run for a lot of offices and lost a lot of races. I was kind of curious of whether the average voter who's not aware of him or the baggage he may be carrying into these races would think about him. His ads were pretty well polished. They were on message, and I thought maybe he could make this a little bit closer. And if things break his way, maybe he pulls out the nomination there. But again, at the end of the day, it just wasn't that close.
I got to tell you, I was just the opposite. I was surprised that the numbers came in as they did, as close as they were. I didn't think Rodney Glassman was going to get even as close as he did.
I kind of, with Jeremy on this more, I thought it was going to be closer, and that was purely based on Senate President Peterson's behavior. Like, he was running like a guy who thought he was in a close race,
right.
with all the mudslinging and all that. So that kind of led me, maybe this is going to be close, but I guess we have a saying in Arizona politics, death, taxes, and Rodney Glassman loses. So that has
well, all
stayed
right.
true.
All right, but we got another election denier winning a race, so it's a common theme here on the Republican side. Involved in the Cyber Ninja, very high profile there with Cyber Ninja, Jeremy. I mean, this stuff, again, does this stuff come popping up now that the general election campaign season is underway?
Oh, sure. I mean, Chris Mays, I'm sure, is going to undoubtedly bring that up a lot. I mean, you say Cyber Ninja's audit, and most, outside of the hardcore supporters of that in this state, most other people are going to kind of snicker at the very mention of it. But this is going to be a heck of a race, I think, because, Mays, this is a purple but still Republican state, and we've seen Mays decided to hitch her wagon to the anti-Trump opposition. She's really become the face of that among statewide Democrats in a way that Katie Hobbs has not wanted to do, because she's been trying to move more towards the center with, I think, this November in mind. So I think this is going to be a very interesting test of that. I mean, she's filed 3 dozen or more lawsuits against the Trump administration. Whatever. You lose count after a while.
What are numbers?
And so, is that going to appeal to voters? And I think Peterson is very much thinking like, hey, this is still a somewhat conservative state. It's still a predominantly Republican state, and he's going to try to make her look like a very out of touch liberal.
I think he's looking at the math too. Remember, like 4 years ago, there was a big split. Republicans had a good sizable advantage in voter registration numbers. That has only grown over the past 4 years to over 300,000. And if you remember, Mays only won by 280 votes. And with the margins, the split between registration and advantage going toward the Republican more and more, I'm thinking he's maybe looking at the math going, I got a really good shot at this one.
Wayne, Congressional District 1 on both sides, interesting races. I'll start with the Democrats because that's where a lot of the hoo-ha is going on here. Michoud wins. First of all, is that a surprise? Secondly, the fact that the Democratic Campaign Committee, the National Committee, put so much money into that race for Marlene Galan Woods, and she didn't finish any better than she did. What kind of messages are being sent there?
Yeah, the DCCC is eating some crow right now. Wasn't a surprise to me. I think I said a few weeks ago on the show that until someone proved me wrong, Shaw's door-knocking capabilities were going to win out in this race. He's just continually won competitive primaries in districts in this area by hitting the doors and just talking to as many people as possible. And yeah, I don't think a lot of people vote based on how, Washington, D.C. Democrats tell them to. And so that didn't really have much of an impact. Some of the endorsements she got maybe moved the needle a little bit. Mark Kelly, a lot of people like him. But at the end of the day, he just connected better with voters.
Yeah, Jeremy, what happened to the Marlene Galan Woods? I mean, you couldn't watch a Diamondbacks game without these commercials saying you can't touch Tommy Shaw over and over again, and it just didn't work.
No, I mean, again, the door knocking, people know him. I think people who meet him like him, and I think he probably had, I mean, this is, again, kind of like Peterson and Glassman, where I thought Shaw was going to win, but I thought, okay, this is going to be a 1 or 2 point race, and it ended up being a lot wider than I thought. And I figured this is going to, and it narrowed a bit, because I figured, okay, there's $3 million of outside money spent against Shaw for the most part, and for Woods. I thought that was going to kind of chip away at that lead, and I think it apparently didn't. Maybe there's a lot of, maybe people saw that, the National Party, which is not particularly popular with the establishment, is not super popular among the Democratic base primary voters.
Well, I think with Woods too, a lot of the help came too late. A lot of those ads you were seeing were coming a couple of weeks after early ballots and early voting had already started. I know that Mark Kelly endorsement came in the last week of the campaign. Like, when you have early voting, it's been going on for 3 weeks. I don't know how much help it's going to give her, but I do want to get back to the DCCC getting involved in this. I would have loved to have overheard that conversation the next day when the DCCC, gives Shaw a call like, "Hey, buddy, sorry about all that.
Yeah.
My bad.
We can trust you now. We couldn't trust you yesterday, but we can trust you today."
But I did hear an interesting theory, it's not mine, about what happened there. And this theory is that maybe those attack ads from the DCCC on Shaw may have helped him as he heads into the general election, because they kept all attacking him for being too conservative or too far right. Well, now he's going into the general election where they're going to try to paint him as this progressive liberal. So, there may have been a benefit at the end of the day.
Little jujitsu going there?
Yeah, a little something going on
Yeah.
there. Maybe not. It was not some conspiracy or some strategy that was thought out. It was like some unintended consequence here.
Whether or not it was intentional, immediately you saw national Republican groups come out with these Shaw is a socialist ad, and I was just kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, this is just another example of kind of like DC consultants inserting themselves into these races they know nothing about, because when I was covering the legislature and Shaw was there, he was getting in trouble with his own Democratic caucus all of the time for working too closely with Republicans. The idea that he's a socialist is just kind of laughable.
Get on the Republican side here now. Jay Feely wins, and it wasn't necessarily close. Joseph Chaplik, just too right-wing for this particular district? Is the Trump endorsement just all-knowing, all-seeing?
I think it's the latter. I think it's more the Trump endorsement and / Feely's name ID with everyone, versus Chaplik is very well known with the base, and they do vote disproportionately in these races, but everyone else, a lot of them know who Jay Feely is. He was a kicker for the Cardinals out here. He's been on television. And then you add the Trump endorsement to that, and I think that's just a combo that was just too much for someone like Chaplik, who was never particularly out there and popular as a lawmaker. It was too much for him to overcome.
Yeah.
Don't you also think he just kind of, Feely fits that district really well? Kind of, he looks like it sounds like kind of the Chamber of Commerce type Republican. This is, remember, it's a wealthy district, one of the more wealthier congressional districts here. And they've elected David Schweiker for a long time. This is a moderate Republican district.
Yes, it's definitely a different district than others.
And DTRIP's counterpart, the National Republican Congressional Committee, they weighed in on this as well. They didn't spend any money, I don't think, for Jay Feely, but he had Trump's endorsement. They backed him, and a big part of it, I think, was, hey, we're getting behind the president's endorsements. But part of it, I think, is looking to the general election. For Chaplik is very conservative, was in the House Freedom Caucus. I think it was a very good fit for the MAGA base for the voters in that district. If it hadn't been for the Trump endorsement, he was really by far the more MAGA candidate.
Right.
But I think the National Party is looking ahead to the general election, saying, hey, if we want, this is going to be a tough year for Republicans. If we want to have a shot, Feely is going to be the way to go there.
Forecasted general.
God, that's amazing. This is one of, I think, 18 genuine toss-up districts in the entire country, and neither party is going to win control of the House without winning CD1s. You're going to see millions and millions and millions of dollars spent on the outside. Right now you have to kind of look at things like Democrats have an advantage in a close race like that because of the year, but God, that's going to be a tough race.
Around the first turn, who's got the lead?
Around the first turn, that's a hard one. I mean, I think, you look at the national environment where that's going to be you see gas prices starting to kick back up again, the war in Iran cranking up again. We'll see what happens with the president's poll numbers and whether, that has a drain in that district. That's what I would kind of be looking at, because I agree with Jeremy. There's going to be so much money spent in that district. It is going to be crazy.
Well, and this is a turnout game. That's what many of these races come down to. Democrats are energized. They're really mad. They're upset about pretty much everything Donald Trump does, and they're motivated to vote. A lot of Republicans are not so motivated. And plus, if Trump's not, there's so many people who they'll crawl over broken glass to go vote for Donald Trump. But if Trump's not on the ballot, they don't care.
And again, it's also an independent game, especially in this district. It most closely reflects the statewide voter registration split. And Donald Trump is just so underwater with those type of voters right now. And Feely is attached to him. Is he the more moderate candidate from this primary? Sure. But he has attached himself to the president. And that could really help Shock.
Does Feely ask the president to come out to this district and campaign for him?
If I were him, I'd ask him not to.
What do you think, Jeremy?
I mean, Donald Trump does what Donald Trump wants.
If
he comes out here and says, I'm rallying, Jay Feely's not going to stay.
And I will say that when the president comes out here, he tends to go to Dream City Church, which is in Feely's district.
So,
I would think, if the truth serum, I would think that Jay Feely would rather that the president just stay out of it. And let his campaign handle this whole thing and not deal with the. I mean, it's a knuckleball when he comes. You don't know what's going to happen or where this is going to go when Trump comes out here.
All right, Dennis. Sticking with you, our last look here at the election, as far as the races that were kind of high profile. Congressional District 5, Mark Lamb. What do you have to do to not win in a landslide in that particular primary? And de facto, the general. I mean, what do you have to do?
I mean, it just shows if you get the Trump endorsement, you're the extreme on the right issues in the right district. I mean, you can get away with a whole lot. I mean, if this is Andy Biggs's old district, you don't get any more conservative than this type of district out there. So I think you get the Trump endorsement back there. That's going to go a long way. And plus, he's got a long history. Former sheriff has a long history with the folks out there. They used to vote for him in big numbers, and he won by wide margins. I was a little bit speechless too, because we've been talking a lot about margins here. I would have thought that would have at least been a little bit closer.
I honestly think it would have been like an 80-20 split had he not had the controversy.
Yeah,
so it's like
right,
I think it did eat in. Like Daniel Keenan, like he spent a lot of money of his own money on the race, but he's an unknown. And to have an unknown running against such a strong candidate like that, and have a similar split to some of these other races.
And he ran some good ads. He had money and he was running ads.
Yeah,
Text messages outside of marriage threatened one of the text, or claim was a text threatened one of the text recipients. Building a new home in Tennessee, apparently. None of it mattered.
None of it. I mean, Mark Lamb, he has a brand. There's a lot of Republican primary voters, the base, they love him. They've loved him for years. He's kind of a celebrity in a lot of those circles. And if you look back at, last time he was on the ballot, 2 years ago, he ran in the Republican primary for Senate against Carrie Lake. He beat her in that district. People in that district like him. And apparently a lot of them like him no matter what kind of sex scandals or whatever else.
And the campaign called all of those claims lies. So
Sure.
we want to make sure that's basically what he said, and basically the voters thought for it. Hey, I got a question. Hugh Lytle.
This was one of the most interesting results in the whole thing. Remember, Hugh Lytle created a whole lot of drama throughout this entire cycle. I mean, he was part of the Arizona Independent Party, where the No Labels was trying to rebrand themselves as that. The court said you can't do that, so they go back to the No Labels Party. Well, he spent about $1 million that we know of right now. We don't know what he entirely spent to win that nomination, because there was a primary in that No Labels gubernatorial race, and he lost to a woman who spent $28,000.
Badly, too.
Yeah.
He was handpicked by Paul Johnson, who took over the party, led it, views himself as kind of the voice of the independent voter who've been kind of, who are disenfranchised, he feels, in a lot of ways by our primary system. I think they asked Horan to drop out at one point.
Oh, yeah.
And he didn't debate, and he spent all this money, he's got signs all over. I'm baffled. I don't know what happened, but man, that was, I've never seen anything like that.
I broke it down too, and I believe it was about $450 per vote is what Lytle spent, and she spent $5.
And Terry Hurahan, we should mention, she could not wait to say, I don't want any help, any assistance from Paul Johnson. I don't want to know he exists.
Yeah,
So-
I spoke to her today actually and just asked her, have you even spoken to them? Like, I know you say you didn't need the money in the primary, obviously, but there's a lot more voters in the general. And she was like, nope, I've already made it clear. I haven't heard from them, but I don't want to hear from them. So she's going it on her own.
I'll tell you who's probably happier about this than Terry Ann Hurahan is Katie Hobbs.
Yes.
Because Hugh Lytle, I mean, he put $2 million of his own money into his account. We don't know if he spent more than $1 million yet in the primary, but I mean, that's something that could have really taken a chunk out of her, because Katie Hobbs needs every independent voter she can find who is not already committed to Andy Biggs. Anyone who's potentially up for grabs, she needs that voter. And Hugh Lytle, those are the people he was going to be making a play for.
Do we get some mysterious money maybe helping Terry Hurahan a little bit here? To...
That'd be interesting. I mean, you might. I just wanted to add one more thing about Lytle. Is like, I think he must have been as shocked as anybody. His people were at least calling me, trying to set up interviews for the general election up in the coming weeks. I think they were as shocked as anybody.
Yeah, he had already bought a lot of TV spots as well going into the general. But again, on the money side, she also told me she's going to reject any PAC money and things like that. So even if these people try and swoop in, they're going to have to do it through individual donations.
You could always have an IE, those
All right.
501c4s.
All right, gentlemen. Good conversation. Good to have you all here. Thanks for joining us. That's it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.
When you want to be more adventurous, Arizona PBS delivers the wonders of the world.